Religion has deeply infiltrated politics, a process that has been building since our nation's founding but accelerated during the Reagan administration in the 1980s. In the modern era, Reagan was one of the first in a long line of shrewd politicians who recognized how to leverage the power of religious fervor and use it for political purposes. Like many politicians after him, Reagan wasn't particularly religious, yet he saw the power encapsulated within the tenets of the Christian Bible and didn't hesitate to use it for his own political ends. This marriage of convenience between sacred Christian doctrine and modern American politics has created a two-way street where the evils of corruption flow unchecked in both directions. Today it's common to see figures like Joel Osteen jet-setting around the globe preaching from a distorted gospel of greed and materialism. By falsely claiming their adherence to the Christian Bible, Osteen and others legitimize their extravagant lifestyles, suggesting that God himself desires such abundance for his chosen people, conveniently overlooking Jesus' passionate cleansing of the temple. Now, the impact of this new religion on its followers is undeniably harmful, not only to our nation, but to Christianity itself. When individuals feel religious justification for pursuing earthly pleasures and possessions, they inevitably question why such things are not bestowed upon them by a gracious God. So politicians step into this abyss of misunderstanding, conveniently explaining that other people are to blame for their lack of success. The explanation fortifies the divide between the chosen and the unchosen, the righteous and the unjust, the good guys and the bad guys. The result of this divisive mindset produces a political religious triad of greed, materialism, and racism. Yes, racism. This triad is a direct threat to American democracy because a political system that respects the will of the people stands in stark contrast to God's will. After all, if you're one of the chosen ones, why should you share your largesse with those who aren't chosen? The central problem with religion is that it naturally creates a divide between the chosen and the unchosen, and it is the unchosen who insist on equality and equity, the cornerstones of a healthy democracy. Democracy, according to this demented mindset, is thus an obstructive force that must be eliminated in order to clear a path for God's will. Now, if this sounds crazy, consider an article penned by Josh Hawley back in 2012, just as he launched his political ambitions. The article is titled, quote, "A Christian Vision for Kingdom Politics, Immanentize the Eschaton." Now, dictionary.com defines eschaton as the final age and the consummation of history, including the last judgment and the defeat of evil, the eternal blessedness of the righteous, and, in some traditions, the creation of a new heaven and earth. So in the article, Hawley advocates for establishing a Christian nation where the righteous dwell and await God's plan for bringing heaven to earth. Now, to immanentize the eschaton means to hasten the coming of the Lord, suggesting that it is not solely up to God to decide when exactly this ecclesiastical event occurs. Instead, it is up to humans to control this process. While on the surface, this may seem blasphemous, some sects of righteous Christians cling to this belief, much like they hold on to the recently manufactured notion of the rapture. So politicians like Senator Hawley are eager to capitalize on this distortion of Christianity and pursue this vision. Additionally, there exists an army of TV evangelists passionately promoting this distorted interpretation of Christianity to the masses and enriching themselves in the process. And the majority of politicians who aren't religious, they see it as an opportunity to grift for money, sex, and power, the three ambitions of all corruption. So what can ordinary Americans do about it? If history teaches us anything, it's that we cannot simply allow this situation to persist, as this open, infected wound on our nation will not heal itself. We must first acknowledge that the vast majority of Americans are not part of the chosen few in this distorted view of Christian destiny and will therefore suffer under its influence. Additionally, a vast majority of Americans do not support political corruption, yet most suffer from its effects. So the fight occurs on two fronts: the true believers in the distorted religious ambition and the politicians who exploit it for their own selfish purposes. In either case, the tactics remain the same. Raise your voice. Share your concerns with all who will listen. While we still have a democracy, call your local, state, and federal legislators. Visit them in their offices when possible. It's actually easier to do than you might think. Write letters to your local newspaper editor. Support politicians who genuinely uphold the tenets of democracy. Organize with like-minded individuals to help spread the word. And most importantly, get on the field and kick the ball. Democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires everyone get out of the stands and onto the field. Our nation's experiment in democracy is nearly 250 years old. Though it is far from fair and just, as Dr. Martin Luther King observed, it tends to bend in that direction over time. We know from history that previous experiments in democracy collapsed under the weight of corruption and fervent idealism. Our democracy is not guaranteed at all. If we don't act, we will lose it. My name is Dan Schaefer, previous Democratic candidate who ran for the Missouri House of Representatives, District 97. Thank you for your time.